The immediate danger to Harvey, very clear, loss of life, property damage, but environmental threats from the storm could last much, much longer. So here to discuss that is Joe Martens. He led New York's efforts to clean up waste and pollutants after Hurricane Sandy in 2012. Thank you so much for joining us, Joe. You know, this fire here at this chemical plant really underlines and highlights the concern. Sure, you can clean up certain things, but we're talking about a large area where there's water everywhere. We really don't know what sort of contaminants are in that water. Explain to us the challenges of cleaning up something like this.
Well, the challenges are enormous. And right now, obviously, the focus is on rescue still. But the Houstonians have a long road to hoe ahead of them. One, the floodwaters contain, as you said, lots and lots of various chemicals from a variety of sources. There are industrial sources. Think about, you know, the hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of households that have been inundated. Everything in their garage has been emptied out. Pesticides, herbicides, fertilizers, raw sewage from treatment plants. The area is literally inundated with a toxic soup, and people need to stay out of that as much as possible. And I realize that is a challenge because they have no place to go in many cases. The next challenge that when the floodwaters recede is solid waste, and that was one of the biggest problems after Superstorm Sandy. Is literally millions of tons of solid waste was left behind, cluttering streets. Every artery of the areas that were affected were piled up with solid waste. You have to find places to put it, and then you have to find places to dispose of it. So it taxes not only the footprint that is affected by the flood, but it affects lots of other areas. In the case of Sandy, we had to export a lot of that garbage to landfills, not only in upstate New York, but in places like Ohio. So we had to relieve environmental requirements at facilities far removed from where the impact of the storm hit. Based on your last story, obviously there's air quality problems. And one of the things we had to do after Sandy was some of that garbage had to be burned just to make room for the garbage as it continued to pile up after the storm. And there was significant controversy about the burning of that garbage. But you have to make very difficult decisions in cases like these. And in every case, the objective is to minimize the impacts to public health.
So Joe, let's talk about some of the practical realities that people will face once they go home. What should people be thinking about, and what should people be doing when they finally are able to return to their homes and there's all this stuff lying around, all this debris, including waste and even possibly some toxic chemicals?
Well, first of all, they shouldn't go back to their homes until public health officials have said it's safe to do so. That's the most important thing. Secondly, a lot of people are just going to be literally shoveling out their homes after the storm, and the garbage ends up on the streets. Basements, first floors, even second floors in this case, because of the intensity of the flooding, is going to deposit sediment everywhere. And again, protective clothing, wearing gloves, wearing masks. Pay attention to public health officials because there are impacts just to exposure from the aftermath of the storm, and every precaution needs to be taken to keep yourself isolated from that. Obviously, good hygiene. If you're in contact with either floodwaters or the debris in the aftermath, you have to clean yourself up afterwards to minimize the possibility of bacterial infections and the like. So pay attention to public health officials is the most important advice I could offer.
Joe Martens, former commissioner of the New York Department of Environmental Conservation. Thank you so much, Joe.
Glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me.